This video is for folks who have been learning the Spanish subjunctive. And if you're not one of those folks, you really should be, because the Spanish subjunctive is the keystone to mastering the language. You're never going to reach your goals until you start tackling it, all right? I'll get off my soapbox now. For folks who have been studying the Spanish subjunctive, I'm going to point out a common mistake that students make when using this mood, especially with emotional reactions and value judgments. If you want to know if you're one of those folks who has been making that particular mistake, translate these two sentences. I like that Juan always arrives early. I like when Juan arrives early. Yeah, you need some time on this, or, you can pause it if you want to. Otherwise, I'm going to go ahead and jump into it. You should have gotten something like this. Me gusta que Juan siempre llegue temprano. And me gusta cuando Juan llega temprano. I would just like to call your attention to the verb in the second clause of both of these. In the first one, it is llegue, and the second one, llega. And these come from the verb llegar, which means to arrive. Llegue is in the present subjunctive, and llega is in the present indicative, also known as the plain old present tense. So what is it about these two sentences that makes one the subjunctive and one not? Well, let's go ahead and look at the English. You'll notice that one of them says, I like that something, and the other one says, I like when something. In Spanish, that would be que and cuando, respectively. Well, I will tell you that the Spanish subjunctive can be tricky, but the easiest and fastest way to learn it correctly as an adult is to reduce it to a series of simple subjunctive triggers. I use that term a lot, subjunctive triggers. What a subjunctive trigger is a construction that reminds us that the subjunctive is required. And if you knew the subjunctive trigger here, you wouldn't have had any trouble with this particular conjugation. You see, when it comes to using the subjunctive with emotional reactions or value judgments, this is the trigger, or the formula, whatever you want to call it. Emotional reaction or value judgment plus que plus subjunctive. That is our subjunctive trigger. So now that you know that, what's missing? What's the difference now between those sentences? One says when, right? Quando. Is that our subjunctive trigger? No. And one uses que. So it fits the formula. That's our subjunctive trigger. So do you see why it's so much easier to learn the subjunctive that way? Just break it down into some formulas. Because you can speak grammatically correct Spanish, like in a complex manner, in a short period of time, just using your deductive reasoning, instead of trying to wait until you develop an ear for the language. And you're like, hey, many, many years from now, thousands of hours of Spanish, you're like, wait a minute, I'm noticing that the conjugation is different with these certain constructions. I've kind of picked up the pattern. It's so much faster to do it this way, folks. So much faster. Emotional reaction, value judgment, plus que, plus subjunctive. Keep that in mind. Look at these two sentences in English. It makes me sad that you don't want to spend time with me. It makes me sad when you don't want to spend time with me. Even if you don't know all the words in there because you just, your Spanish isn't at that level, which one's a subjunctive and which one isn't, you should know right away. First one is subjunctive, folks. First one, because we have que in there. Emotional reaction or value judgment, que, we know the subjunctive is going to be there. Me entristece que no quieras pasar tiempo conmigo. Quieras, as, subjunctive. As opposed to, me entristece cuando no quieres pasar tiempo conmigo. Quieres, es, not subjunctive. All right, now that you understand that, I want to tell you about a time when cuando will trigger the subjunctive, so you won't confuse it with this time. And later you're like, Paul said something about cuando doesn't trigger it, and then you're like, I see cuando with it. It's just another subjunctive trigger. Yes, folks, there's more than one. And here's the subjunctive trigger. It's not quite a formula, but you'll get it. So you have two clauses, and one thing will happen in one clause when the thing in the other clause happens first. Hear that when in there? That's kind of how that works. Well, the thing that has to occur first will be in the subjunctive mood. Here's an example. Let me know when you have the information. When you want to know, when you have the information. So when you have the information has to occur first, so that is going to be in the subjunctive, okay? Avísame cuando tengas la información. Tengas. That comes from tener, to have, and it's tengas in the subjunctive mood. Here's another example of that. I will eat dinner when I'm hungry. And that I will do something should be like, okay, I'm waiting for something else to occur first. That could also be a clue for you. Cenaré cuando tenga hambre. Cenaré cuando tenga hambre. So if you didn't know that verb, cenar means to eat dinner. In English, we kind of, I don't know, we just don't have the diversity of the vocabulary. We eat breakfast, we eat lunch, we eat dinner. In Spanish, they have separate verbs for these things. Pretty cool. In English, we look at something, we look for something. Those are separate verbs in Spanish. Just something I'm pointing out. I go off on tangents, folks. Sorry about that. So now do you see the difference between this subjunctive trigger and the first one? I hope so. Before I end the video, I just want to tell you about my new membership site for people who want more than what I offer here on the main channel. It's called the Qroo Spanish Crew, and I've got a lot going on over there. I'm pretty excited about the whole project. I have exclusive videos and courses for all skill levels, downloadable worksheets for videos that appear on this channel and there, live events scheduled throughout the month, and even an interactive forum to ask me questions directly. And yes, I actually answer you. The URL for that new site is on the screen, and you'll also find a link to it in the description section. So I hope to see you there. Until next time, hasta luego.